Today, we're jumping into some really cool science. We're going to talk about the connection between when you eat and how your body handles inflammation. You know that whole immune response system? Well, we're going to look at some fascinating new research that shows how just changing your meal times could potentially calm everything down.
So let's kick things off with a big question. Think about your immune system. It's like your body's own personal security team, right? It's there to protect you. But what if that security team got a little over-enthusiastic? What if it just got stuck in the on position and couldn't switch off?
And that idea leads us right into our first section here, the body's silent alarm. We're going to dive into what inflammation actually is and what happens when it goes from being a helpful short-term fix to a chronic long-term problem.
Honestly, the best way to picture chronic inflammation is to think of a fire alarm that's just blaring constantly. Even when there's no smoke, no fire, nothing, it just won't turn off. That's kind of what's happening in the body. It's not a response to a new injury, it's this persistent, low-level state of emergency that keeps your whole system on high alert 24/7.
And being on high alert all the time? Yeah, that's definitely not harmless. There's a mountain of research now that connects this simmering body-wide inflammation to some of the biggest health challenges we face, from autoimmune issues like rheumatoid arthritis to things like heart disease and type 2 diabetes.
So, you might be thinking, if this inflammation is so silent, how in the world do we even know it's there? Well, this is where scientists have gotten really clever by learning how to track these tiny, invisible clues in our bodies.
The amazing thing is, researchers don't have to guess anymore. They can literally look for specific clues, these things called biomarkers, that are just floating around in your blood. And these markers tell a really detailed story about what your inflammatory state looks like. It's like being a detective for the immune system. And here are just a few of the ways they do that. Let's just take the first one, the SI. It might look complicated, but it's basically a score that's calculated by looking at the numbers of different types of immune cells, like platelets and neutrophils. If that score is high, it suggests your immune system is working overtime, and things are pretty inflamed.
Okay, so we've laid out the problem, this chronic inflammation, and we've seen how scientists can actually measure it. So now let's pivot to something that's getting a ton of scientific buzz as a way to maybe, just maybe, dial it all back down: intermittent fasting.
You know, the idea behind intermittent fasting is so simple, but it's also kind of profound. It's not really about changing what you eat, it's all about changing when you eat. So instead of your body being in that constant "I'm digesting" mode, you're creating these intentional cycles between eating and not eating. It gives your whole system a chance to just shift gears.
And that shift right there is exactly why scientists are so interested. They are looking really closely at whether these cycles of fasting can act like a dimmer switch for our immune system, helping to regulate or modulate the very pathways that can drive that chronic inflammation.
So, what's actually going on here? How does just changing your meal timing affect cells that you can't even see? Okay, this is where we get into the really cool cellular biology of it all.
Now, before we connect all the dots, we have to talk about inflammation's partner in crime, something called oxidative stress. The absolute best analogy for this is cellular rust. It's this natural damage that happens to our cells just from, living and breathing and making energy. But when it gets out of control, it totally fuels that inflammatory fire.
Okay, so here's how it all seems to link together. When you start fasting, your body switches its fuel source, right? But it also flips on this incredible deep cleaning process called autophagy. Think of it as your cell's recycling program. It starts clearing out all the old, junky, damaged parts. And by doing that, it reduces that cellular rust, the oxidative stress. With fewer damaged signals going off, the immune system, our security detail, can finally stand down from high alert. And guess what happens next? Those inflammation markers we talked about start to drop.
And the end result, which a lot of studies are now showing, is basically what you see here. A real, measurable drop in those inflammation markers after someone has been fasting. It's a visible shift from that high alert, inflamed state to a much calmer, more balanced one.
All right, so let's pull all of this together. What is the big picture here? Let's quickly recap the key things to take away from this dive into fasting and inflammation.
So to sum it all up, we're learning that this low-grade chronic inflammation is a really big deal for long-term health. The good news is we now have the tools to actually measure it. And what's really exciting is that the science suggests that simple lifestyle changes, like intermittent fasting, might give us a way to fight it at the cellular level by tackling that oxidative stress and turning on our body's own cleanup crew.
Now, of course, it is so important to remember that we're talking about the cutting edge of nutritional science here. This is absolutely not a prescription or medical advice. It's just an inside look into a field that is moving incredibly fast and could really change how we think about food, our immune system, and our health down the road.
And all of this leaves us with one last, really fascinating question to chew on. For so long, right, the focus has always been on what we eat. But as this science keeps developing, you have to wonder, could when we eat be just as powerful? It really seems like we're only just beginning to figure that out.